The house settles into its small rituals as twilight slides down the blinds. The lamps throw soft rectangles across the living room, one over the armchair where John Parker sits, another over the bookshelf where Dust has learned to live with his memories. Outside, a late August breeze lifts the maple leaves and carries the distant sound of laughter from a neighbor's backyard, life continuing in a thin, indifferent thread. John is 60, not old by the calendar so much as by the list of things he carries. His hair has thinned into silver at the temples. His hands still remember the hours of work that built a life for a family of 3. He wears the same cardigan he always wears when the evening turns cool. A kettle whistles off-screen. He pours water, drops a bag of chamomile into a chipped cup, and sets it on the saucer that used to be Margaret's. He never liked chamomile once, Margaret did, but he drinks it now because it fits the small, deliberate rituals that keep mornings from collapsing into one another. A crackling radio sits on the mantel, an old lamp set to a soft channel, low-volume jazz, the clarinet carrying a melancholic line like a memory nudged awake. He hums along, more out of habit than melody, and submerges himself in the ease of an ordinary evening. Crossword on the coffee table, slippers pushed up on the rug, the house breathing around him. On the hall table rests an old landline phone, heavy, beige, the kind with a cord that refuses to unravel fully. John keeps it within reach. He has a habit of answering calls in the kitchen when he's making tea, of putting the receiver back a fraction short as if the line itself needed to linger. Margaret used to scold him for it, somewhat playfully, calling him absent-minded. It is an absent-mindedness that now reads differently. The phone rings, a brittle sound that slips through the warm air. He sets the crossword aside, the paste of ink on his thumb drying into another small, private marking on a life. The receiver lifts, familiar and cold at the ear. "Hi," he says. "Hi, Dad," a voice replies, bright and practical. Emma, 35, efficient, the sort of daughter who had always kept appointments like sacred things. There is a faint city noise behind her, the tone of someone who is never long in one place. "Just checking in. How are you?" John smooths a paper in his hand. "Buying time." "I'm fine. I made tea. Need anything? Do you want me to pick up?" "I'm fine, Dad." "Really?" There's a cadence to her voice he recognizes from 1,000 phone calls, the bridge between honesty and reassurance shaped to hold him at arm's length. "Michael and I are catching a flight tomorrow, Miami. Work thing. We'll be back next week. Don't worry about anything." John hears the practiced cheer in that. It is the same cheer that used to follow holiday plans, the same cheer that once promised presents with a frequency it didn't always keep. "I'll be here," he says. "Call if you." "Okay, Dad. Love you." The word is quick, standard, and he knows enough not to push for more. She says she'll call back. She signs off with the warm, efficient goodbye of someone who manages the world by keeping schedules. He replaces the receiver, but not all the way. The cradle doesn't click into place. Instead the receiver leans in a hair's breadth of sound, the cord lengthening into the small, expectant space between two breaths. It is an instinct as old as the dinners she missed and the nights she kept, a superstition that staying half open keeps lines of conversation alive. John leans back and lets the silence from the open line seep into the room. It settles into corners the way dust does, and he listens to the radio, to the kettle as it cools, to the clock making small choices of second by second. The living room is full of ordinary things that mean everything. Framed photos, a dent on the mantel where someone bumped in a hurry, an armchair worn precisely where two people once shared it. He folds his hands over the cup and closes his eyes. There is a tenderness in the routine, that patient, stubborn insistence to keep a world in which he belongs. Tonight, it feels particularly fragile, a porcelain thing balanced on a thread. Outside, laughter dims. Inside, John breathes once and waits, settling, as he always has, for whatever the next ring will bring. The receiver stays half off the hook. The line, small and open, hums with the possibility of voice. The hum on the line changes, no longer the empty hiss of distance, but the scrape of a chair, the shuffle of feet. Then, clear as if she were in the next room, Emma's voice drifts through the receiver, stripped of the brightness she'd worn only seconds before. "We have to put him in a retirement home." John freezes, cup halfway to his lips. His eyes lift to the phone on the table as though it had just bitten him. The tea trembles, a thin ripple across the surface. A man's voice answers, "Michael." Smooth, dismissive, with a tone that's learned to slide over obstacles. "Yeah. Once the house is sold, we'll have the money. $1 million, easy. Then it's over. No more worrying." There's a faint chuckle in his words. It's not cruel in the obvious way, it's casual, like talking about selling an old car. Emma sighs, lower, almost conspiratorial. "We just have to make sure he doesn't catch on. He's too trusting." Trusting. The word sticks. John sits in the armchair without moving, letting the receiver breathe their conversation into his living room. Michael again, careless. "We'll talk to the realtor tomorrow. If we keep him distracted, it'll be smooth. Maybe send him to Harry's for a few days. He'll think it's his idea." They keep talking, vacation plans, the freedom they'll have once it's done, the way the place will look with a new coat of paint before resale. John's fingers tighten around the armrest. The air feels heavier, as if the house itself has begun to understand. Around him, every object, Margaret's framed photo, the scuffed coffee table, the embroidered cushions, suddenly belongs to a past tense they're already erasing. He doesn't interrupt. Doesn't slam the phone down or shout through the line. He just listens, each word setting another stone inside his chest. When they hang up on their end, the line dies to silence. John lifts the receiver, places it gently back in the cradle this time. He sits in the quiet, hearing nothing but the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. His tea has gone cold. John doesn't move for a long moment. The cold tea sits in his hand like a weight he can't set down. The room feels different now, smaller somehow, the walls leaning in, every shadow listening. He sets the cup aside, leans back, and lets his eyes drift to the mantel. A photo in a wooden frame catches the lamplight, Margaret in her garden hat, smiling in that way that reached her eyes. His thumb rubs the armrest unconsciously, as if trying to smooth the sharp edges from what he's just heard. The quiet pulls him backward, into a memory. Sunlight spills across the fresh paint of a new house. This house, decades younger, smelling of pine and sawdust. John, 30 years old and full of strength, stands on a ladder brushing the last stroke of white onto the porch rail. Margaret steps out with 2 glasses of lemonade, the summer heat pressing her hair against her forehead. "Looks good, doesn't it?" she says, handing him the glass. "It will," John replies, gazing at the yard. "Give it a few years, and Emma will be running through here like she owns the place." As if on cue, a little girl darts across the grass, Emma, no more than 5, chasing a red rubber ball. Her laughter carries through the air like a ribbon, curling into every corner of the property. Margaret leans against him, looking at the house. "This is for us," she says softly. "No matter what happens. This will always be our home." John smiles at that, not realizing how heavy those words would feel one day. The memory fades. The living room settles back into its older self, faded curtains, books with bent spines, the faint creak of a house that has stood through storms. But now, every object feels like proof. Proof of decades no one else seems to value. Proof of the promise he and Margaret made, even if she's not here to keep it with him. He exhales slowly. Whatever they think they can take from him, they're forgetting one thing. This house isn't just wood and brick. It's him. And he isn't done yet. The next morning, John notices the first signs, things he might have dismissed before last night. A business card lies half-tucked under the front door, Kelly and Finch Realty. A neat little slogan in blue script reads, "Turning homes into opportunities." He bends to pick it up, holding it between his fingers a moment longer than necessary. The cardstock is thick, expensive. Someone paid for quality. By mid-afternoon, Emma calls. Her voice is sugar-coated, the kind of sweetness that comes from a jar. "Hi, Dad. Just wondering, you've been spending a lot of time at home lately. Don't you ever get lonely?" He glances toward the mantel, toward Margaret's photo. "Not really," he says. "There's always something to do." A pause, then a quick laugh. Sure, but you know, sometimes change is good. A smaller place, less to worry about. John lets the silence stretch just long enough for her to feel it. This house doesn't worry me, he replies. That evening, Michael drops by. No Emma, just him, smelling faintly of aftershave and expensive cologne. He stands in the doorway, hands in his pockets, grinning like someone about to deliver a punchline. Hey, John. You ever think about how nice it'd be not to have to mow the lawn? Or fix the gutters? Bet you'd love a place where people cook for you, clean for you, and you could just relax all day. John studies him, eyes narrowing slightly. Sounds like a hotel. Michael laughs, slapping the doorframe. Exactly. But, you know, for older folks. Later that night, as the clock ticks past 11, John sits in the dark living room. He's not tired. Not yet. From the front porch, he sees a shadow move, someone stepping back from the door. He waits until the sound of a car pulling away fades into the distance. When he opens the door, there's nothing there but a faint chemical smell of fresh perfume and the second card from Kelly and Finch Realty, this one clipped to a glossy flyer showing his own house, digitally brightened, polished, perfect. The caption at the bottom reads, "Estimated value, $1,050,000. He closes the door slowly, flyer in hand. Now the cracks aren't just in the walls, they're in the people who were supposed to protect them. By morning, John has already made up his mind. There will be no confrontation, no raised voices across the kitchen table. Emma and Michael would only deny everything, twist his words, make him sound paranoid. No, if they are playing a quiet game, then he will play it better. He brews his coffee the way Margaret used to. 2 scoops, a slow pour, no rush. Sitting at the kitchen table, he flips through his worn leather address book until he finds the number he hasn't dialed in months. The phone rings twice before a familiar voice answers, gruff but warm. Harry Cole. Harry, it's John. A pause, then the slow, deliberate tone of a man who has seen too much. John Parker. It's been a while. I need your help. And I need it. Quiet. Harry doesn't ask why, not directly. He just exhales, the sound like paper being folded. Is this about family? Yes. Then come by tonight. Back door. That afternoon, Emma calls again. Dad, you remember Harry? He's been asking about you. You should visit him sometime. Maybe stay a couple of days, get out of the house. Her voice is cheerful, but the timing isn't lost on him. The conversation from last night echoes in his mind, Michael's suggestion, the plan to keep him distracted. He keeps his voice calm. That's a good idea. I'll call him. By evening, John is at Harry's small office, the smell of coffee and old law books wrapping around him like an old coat. Harry, a broad-shouldered man with thinning hair, pours 2 mugs and sets them on the desk. So, tell me everything. John does. From the overheard conversation to the realtor flyers slipped under his door, every detail lands heavy in the quiet room. Harry listens without interrupting, only nodding occasionally. When John finishes, Harry leans back, fingers steepled. They're counting on you doing nothing. Let's make sure they regret that. For the first time in days, John feels something stir under the weight in his chest. Not anger exactly, but the slow, certain burn of resolve. They make a plan. 2 days later, the trap springs without a sound. It begins with a call from Emma. Her tone is light, but John can hear the undercurrent, a quiet push toward the next step. Dad, Harry mentioned he might need some help sorting through old files. Why don't you go stay with him for a few days? You could catch up, maybe help around his place. John glances out the kitchen window, watching a squirrel pick at the bird feeder. That's thoughtful. I'll pack a bag. He says it as if the idea is hers, letting her think she's guiding the board. That evening, Michael shows up to drive him. His smile is a touch too wide. Travel light, huh? No need to bring much. Harry's got everything you need. John locks the front door behind him. His suitcase is modest, just enough to make the absence look believable. As the car pulls away, he glances in the side mirror. In the fading daylight, a sedan he doesn't recognize idles a block away. A man in a suit is on the phone, leaning against the hood. A real estate agent? Probably. At Harry's place, the welcome is genuine. Harry's home is smaller, lined with books and old photographs, the kind of place that smells of brewed coffee even at night. Once Michael drives off, Harry locks the door and hands John a fresh mug. They'll think you're out of the way for the weekend. Maybe longer. Gives them time to make their move. John sits at the kitchen table, the mug warm in his hands. And we'll be ready when they do. Meanwhile, across town, Emma scrolls through her phone while Michael reviews documents on his laptop. The realtor says the buyers are serious, Michael says, tapping the screen. We could close in under a week if the paperwork goes smoothly. Emma smiles faintly. By the time Dad comes back, it'll all be done. She doesn't know that, at this very moment, Harry is already scanning the county's property records and planting legal tripwires that will snap shut the second they try to cross the line. By Friday morning, the gears are in motion. Emma stands in the airy conference room of Kelly and Finch Realty, sunlight glinting off the glass table. Michael sits beside her, leaning back in his chair like a man already spending the money. Across from them, the realtor flips through a neatly bound packet of papers. All we need is the homeowner's signature, and we can finalize the sale. Emma slides a single sheet forward. The signature is there, John Parker's name, clean and flowing in blue ink. The realtor glances at it, nods with professional approval. Perfect. The buyers are ready to wire $1 million even. In Harry's home office, John sits beside the lawyer's desk. Harry's computer screen glows with the same documents Emma just signed. That's not your signature, Harry says flatly. No. Harry zooms in, highlighting the loops and lines. Classic forgery. They even used the wrong pen weight, idiots. He begins taking screenshots, filing them alongside copies of John's real signature from past legal forms. Back in the realtor's office, Emma and Michael shake hands, beaming. The realtor hands them a folder. Congratulations. We'll proceed to escrow. You should see the funds within 48 hours. As they leave, Michael leans in close to Emma. Miami was nice. Next time, Italy. That night, suitcases open on their bed, they pack for another trip, just a short getaway to celebrate. Neither of them notices the small red flag flashing quietly in the escrow system, triggered by Harry's legal safeguards. By the time their plane lifts off the runway the next morning, the sale isn't moving forward, it's unraveling. And they don't have a clue. ChatGPT. At Harry's office, the printer hums steadily, spitting out page after page. Each bears an official seal or a highlighted clause, proof that the so-called sale of John's house isn't just invalid, it's criminal. Harry slides a stack toward John. Forgery, fraud, misrepresentation. And that's before we get into elder financial abuse. We don't even need to fight this, we can erase it. John runs a hand over the top sheet. The paper is warm from the printer. So it's over. Harry shakes his head. It's over for the sale. But that doesn't mean they won't try again. If you want this to end for good, we make it airtight. I can restore full control of the property to you and lock it so no one but you can authorize changes. John nods slowly. Do it. And I want the locks changed before they get back. The next morning, while Emma and Michael sip cocktails at an oceanside bar, a locksmith's van pulls up in front of John's house. The man works quickly, new deadbolts, reinforced frames, even a hidden latch inside the front door. When he's done, John pays him in cash and thanks him with a firm handshake. Inside, he walks from room to room, reclaiming each space. He opens windows to let in fresh air, folds away the for sale flyer left on the kitchen counter, and drops it into the trash. That evening, Harry stops by with a manila envelope. It's done. The deed's back in your name alone. I also filed a restraining clause. No one can sell, refinance, or even list this place without your written and notarized consent. John takes the envelope and sets it on the table without opening it. He doesn't need to read the papers to know the truth. For the first time in weeks, the house feels like his again. But as he looks out the window toward the quiet street, he knows the real moment he's been waiting for is still to come, when Emma and Michael return, expecting to walk in as if nothing has changed. That's when they'll find out. 2 days later, the air in John's neighborhood feels different. The late afternoon sun casts long golden streaks across the street as a moving shadow appears at the corner, his own silhouette, returning home for good. John walks up the familiar path, the crunch of gravel under his shoes steady and unhurried. In his hand is a small brown paper bag with a few groceries, bread, tea, and honey. His other hand rests lightly on the strap of an old leather satchel, the one he's carried since his teaching days. He unlocks the new deadbolt and steps inside. The scent of fresh paint and polished wood greets him. Harry's locksmith did excellent work. Every door closes with a quiet, satisfying click. John sets the groceries on the kitchen counter, then stands for a long moment in the center of the living room, taking it all in. The empty silence feels peaceful. He spends the next hour moving through the rooms. In the bedroom, he changes the curtains back to the ones his late wife, Margaret, loved, light cream with a faint floral pattern. In the hallway, he dusts the framed photographs, family Christmases, summer picnics, Emma's high school graduation. Some memories sting. But he doesn't remove them. Let them remember what they've lost. Finally, he sits at the kitchen table. From the satchel, he pulls out a sheet of thick stationery and a black fountain pen. His hand moves slowly but with certainty as he writes. This house is not for sale. Neither is my trust. You've taken enough. He signs only his first name, John, folds the note and slips it into a white envelope. In block letters, he writes, "For you." He places it on the welcome mat, right in front of the door, and presses it flat with his palm. Then, with the sun dipping low outside, he makes himself a cup of tea, settles into his armchair, and waits. Because soon, they'll be back. Morning light streamed softly through the cream curtains, painting warm stripes on the hardwood floor. For the first time in months, John awoke without the dull ache of worry pressing on his chest. He sat up in bed, listening to the quiet hum of the house. No hurried footsteps, no muffled arguments, no false cheer in voices plotting behind closed doors. Just stillness. He brewed himself tea, the kettle's whistle sounding almost like a welcome home. The rich aroma filled the kitchen as he poured the golden liquid into his favorite chipped mug, the one Margaret had bought him on their 25th anniversary. Still here, he thought, running a thumb along its familiar crack. The first thing he did that day was reclaim the space, piece by piece. Outside, the garden looked wild and abandoned, the flower beds choked with weeds. John knelt in the dirt, his knees protesting, but he didn't care. He pulled at the roots, tossing them into a heap, until the soil was free and breathing again. Then, from the shed, he brought out a cardboard box labeled Margaret Seeds. Inside were dozens of little paper envelopes, her neat handwriting marking each one: lavender, daisies, marigolds. One by one he pressed the seeds into the earth, whispering to himself as if speaking to her, "We'll have flowers again, love." The scent of fresh soil mixed with the faint perfume of the first blooming roses by the fence. Inside the house, he dusted every shelf, polished every picture frame. In the living room, he rehung the family portraits in their rightful places, not as a shrine to the people in them, but as a reminder of what had once been worth protecting. In the study, he cleared away the clutter Emma and Michael had left behind, piles of property brochures, cheap wine glasses, and receipts from their dinners out. He found a crumpled piece of paper with scribbled notes about selling fast and splitting profit. He stared at it for a moment before quietly feeding it into the fireplace, watching the edges curl and turn to ash. By afternoon, the house no longer felt like a place someone had tried to strip of its soul. It felt alive again, lived in, loved, guarded. John sat back in his armchair, a soft breeze drifting in through the open window. Outside, a neighbor passed by, waving. He waved back, feeling an unfamiliar lightness in his chest. For years, he'd believed that family was something you could never lose, that blood meant loyalty, that a shared past meant a shared future. But now he understood, family was not who claimed you when it was convenient. Family was who stood beside you when you had nothing left to give. He thought about the envelope resting on the welcome mat. Soon, Emma and Michael would see it. Soon, they'd understand the finality of what they'd done. He took a slow sip of tea, letting the steam warm his face. For the first time in a long while, John felt free, not because he'd won some battle over property or money, but because he had taken back the one thing they couldn't buy or steal: his dignity. And now, the house was more than just walls and a roof again. It was his home. The late afternoon sun hung low over the quiet suburban street when the shiny black SUV rolled up to the curb in front of John's house. Its windows reflected the golden light, but inside, the movement was lively. Laughter, the rustle of shopping bags, the faint thump of pop music from the radio. The rear door swung open, and Emma stepped out first. Her skin was sun-kissed, her hair lighter from days under tropical skies. She wore a flowy white dress and oversized sunglasses, clutching a designer handbag that hadn't existed before the trip. Behind her, Michael climbed out, his polo shirt collar popped, one hand holding 2 expensive suitcases, the other balancing a box of duty-free liquor. "Home sweet home," he said with a satisfied sigh, glancing up at the familiar front porch. "God, it feels good to be back." Emma turned to him, her smile wide and almost childlike in its giddiness. "Can you believe it, Mike? $1 million for a place we barely had to lift a finger to sell. And now—" She trailed off, as if tasting the word on her tongue. "Freedom." They both laughed, the light, careless laugh of people who believe they've won. They carried their luggage up the path, chatting about the trip, the endless buffets, the cocktails with tiny umbrellas, the couples they'd met on the beach. Michael pulled a set of shiny keys from his pocket, flipping them in the air like a coin. "I can't wait to sleep in our bed again," he said. "Even those 5-star hotel mattresses can't beat home." Emma's heels clicked against the porch steps. She reached for the handle of the front door, but Michael, grinning, inserted the key first. A small, metallic clink. The key didn't turn. He frowned, tried again, harder this time. Still nothing. The metal scraped uselessly inside the lock. "That's weird," he muttered. "Maybe you grabbed the wrong key," Emma said lightly, though a tiny crease appeared between her brows. "Nope. This is it." He twisted again, frustration sharpening his movements. The lock held firm, silent, unyielding. They exchanged a glance, their earlier ease evaporating. "What the hell?" Michael leaned down, inspecting the lock. "It's been changed." Emma's voice rose, thin and tight. "Changed? Why would it?" Her eyes caught something white on the welcome mat. A plain envelope, perfectly centered, its edges fluttering in the slight breeze. The handwriting on the front was steady, deliberate. "For you." Emma bent down, her hand trembling as she picked it up. The paper was heavier than she expected, the kind that crackled softly when bent. "Open it," Michael urged, a note of irritation in his tone, but underneath, something colder. She slid her finger under the seal. The paper tore with a sound that felt far too loud in the quiet street. Before she could read, the wind carried a faint sound, the creak of a curtain shifting. Across the street, Mrs. Callahan's face appeared at her window, curious eyes fixed on them. Farther down, Mr. Harris leaned against his fence, watching. The whole block seemed to pause, sensing something was about to unfold. Emma unfolded the paper. Her eyes scanned the first few lines, and her lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. Her hands shook harder now, and color drained from her face. "What?" Michael demanded, stepping closer. Emma's voice broke into a whisper. "It's from my father." The words hung in the air like the first rumble of distant thunder. Michael reached for the letter, but Emma pulled it instinctively to her chest, as if trying to shield it. For the first time in months, her confidence faltered. Behind that locked door, somewhere inside the house they thought they owned, John was waiting. Not with anger, not with shouts, but with something far more dangerous. Patience. Emma's fingers tightened on the letter until the paper crumpled slightly under her grip. Michael's patience snapped. He stepped forward, snatching it from her hands before she could react. "Give me that," he muttered, unfolding it in a single, sharp motion. The first line was written in neat, deliberate strokes, not rushed, not emotional. Emma. Michael. By the time you read this, the locks will have been changed, and this house will no longer belong to you. Michael's jaw flexed, but he kept reading aloud, his voice growing colder with each word. "This was the home where your mother and I built a life, where we celebrated birthdays, where we argued and made up, where we dreamed about your futures. I thought you would one day protect it. Instead, you treated it as something to be stripped and sold." Emma looked away, her gaze drifting to the flower beds by the porch. Freshly turned soil. New buds pushing through. She hadn't noticed them before. "I gave you both a choice, though you may not have seen it that way. I asked for honesty, for a shred of loyalty, for one sign that blood meant more to you than money. You gave me none of it." Michael scoffed. Dramatic old man. But his voice lacked conviction. Emma, still staring at the flowers, felt something in her chest tighten. "So I made my choice. I sold the house, not to you, not to some faceless buyer, but to someone who understands its worth beyond its walls. A stranger to you, perhaps, but a friend to me. Someone who will keep it standing, keep it loved." Michael's head jerked up. He sold it. The money. "You'll never see a cent. Consider it payment for the years I spent giving you everything without asking for anything in return, except decency. Payment for the groceries I bought when you were broke. For the bills I covered when you were careless. For the nights I stayed awake wondering if you'd make it home safe." Emma swallowed hard. The words cut more deeply than she expected. "You will read this and think I am cruel. You will tell yourselves I am bitter. But the truth is, I am free, and so are you. Free to live without the burden of pretending to care for someone you see only as an obstacle to your plans." Michael crumpled the bottom of the page in his fist. "He thinks this is over? He thinks a letter is enough to just erase us." Emma didn't answer. "Do not try to find me. Do not call. If you must speak of me, tell people I died, because the man you knew, the one who believed in you without question, is gone." The signature at the bottom was simple. John. Michael let out a harsh laugh, shoving the letter back into the envelope. "He's bluffing. We'll get a lawyer, we'll." A voice from across the street interrupted. Mrs. Callahan, leaning on her porch railing, called out casually, "Oh, I heard he's moved out by the lake. Looks happier than I've seen him in years." Emma's head whipped toward her. "The lake." Mrs. Callahan shrugged, smiling faintly before disappearing inside. Michael's jaw tightened. "Pack your stuff. We're going there." Emma hesitated, glancing back at the locked door. For a moment, she imagined her father inside, sitting in his armchair, sipping tea, watching them through the curtains. But she knew that wasn't true. He was gone. And yet, somehow, it felt like he was winning. The envelope lay limp in Michael's hand, the paper creased from how tightly he had been gripping it. He had read the letter twice now, once aloud and once under his breath, as though a second reading might somehow reveal a loophole. But the words were iron, and every sentence carried the weight of finality. Emma stood motionless beside him, her eyes fixed on the place where the door's brass lock gleamed in the fading sunlight. She had known her father's handwriting all her life, neat, deliberate, almost old-fashioned, but she had never seen it wielded like a weapon. Michael's voice finally broke the silence. "He's bluffing. You know that, right? This whole letter's just his way of scaring us. We can fight this." Emma said nothing. Michael shook his head and unfolded the letter again, reading the lines that seemed to burn into his mind. "This was never about money. It was about trust. And you shattered it. I gave you everything, and in return, you tried to take the one thing you hadn't yet earned, my home. I will not forgive you. I will not come back." The words were like a door slamming in their faces. Across the street, Mrs. Callahan leaned over her porch railing, pretending to fuss with a hanging plant while keeping her eyes fixed on them. She had lived in the neighborhood for decades, and gossip traveled faster through her than through the morning paper. Emma finally turned toward her. "Did you see him leave?" Mrs. Callahan smiled faintly, as though she had been waiting for the question. "Oh, I did. 2 nights ago. Loaded up a few boxes into his friend's truck, not much else. Heard he's staying out by the lake. Looks happier now." She tilted her head. "Maybe he's better off without the noise." Michael's jaw tightened. "Better off? Without us?" Mrs. Callahan didn't answer directly. "Some people just want peace." She gave them one last glance before disappearing into her house. The quiet that followed was thick and uncomfortable. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked. A car passed slowly, the driver glancing curiously at the two of them standing on the porch of a house they no longer owned. Emma's hands trembled as she folded the letter again, slipping it back into the envelope as though she could hide the truth inside it. "We can't just let this go," she said finally, her voice low. Michael's eyes hardened. "No. We're going to find him. He doesn't get to run off, keep the house, and act like we don't exist." Emma hesitated. The image of her father sitting in his armchair flashed in her mind, a steaming cup of tea, the radio playing softly, curtains drawn against the world. There had been a kind of quiet dignity to him, even in his worst moments. She wondered if that dignity was what he had found again, and if taking it from him now would be the final break between them. Michael was already moving. "We'll go to the lake. We'll make him listen. If he sold the place, we'll demand the money. If he hasn't, we'll make him sign it over." Emma followed, but her steps were slower. She tucked the envelope into her bag, as though afraid it might blow away if she let it go. As they walked to the car, she glanced back at the house, her childhood home. The curtains in the front window were open now, and inside she could see the faint outline of a stranger arranging books on a shelf. A stranger who would live in the space where she had taken her first steps, where her mother had baked pies in the autumn, where her father had read bedtime stories. The realization hit her like cold water. That part of her life was gone, not because of the letter, but because of what she and Michael had done long before it arrived. Michael started the engine, his jaw set. "We'll fix this," he said. But Emma wasn't sure anymore. The letter had been more than a goodbye, it had been a verdict. And deep down, she knew her father had already moved on. The road to the lake twisted through dense pines, their shadows stretching like dark fingers across the narrow asphalt. The August heat had begun to fade into the first whispers of autumn, and the air was cool, sharp with a scent of damp earth and pine sap. Michael gripped the steering wheel as if it might try to escape from his hands, his jaw tight, eyes fixed straight ahead. Emma sat in silence, watching the trees blur past. The letter in her bag seemed heavier with every mile, as though her father's words were weighing her down, warning her against what they were about to do. But Michael's mind was locked on one thing, reclaiming what he thought was theirs. They reached the edge of the lake just before sunset. The water was still, reflecting the orange and pink of the sky like a sheet of glass. Off to the right, nestled among the trees, was a small wooden cabin. Smoke curled lazily from its chimney, the smell of burning cedar drifting toward them. "That's it," Michael muttered, pulling the car off the gravel road. The cabin looked almost like something out of another time, weathered but solid, with a small porch and 2 rocking chairs that faced the lake. A fishing rod leaned against the railing, and a stack of firewood was neatly arranged by the door. John's truck was parked to the side, its bed filled with a few crates and a toolbox. As they approached, the sound of a radio drifted out, soft jazz, low and unhurried. John was sitting on the porch, a mug of tea in one hand, his eyes on the water. He didn't move when Michael stomped up the steps, didn't even look at him at first. Only after a long, deliberate sip did he glance their way. "Well," he said calmly, "I was wondering when you'd come." Michael didn't bother with pleasantries. "We're not here for small talk. You can't just disappear and take everything with you." That house, John interrupted, his voice firm but not raised. was mine to begin with. Every nail, every brick, every blade of grass in that yard. I gave you both more than I owed. And you thought you could push me out of it while I was still breathing." Emma winced. She had heard anger from her father before, but this was different. His words were not shouted, they were measured, precise, like a surgeon's scalpel. Michael stepped forward. "You think you're teaching us some kind of lesson? All you're doing is breaking this family apart." John's gaze hardened. "Family isn't built on what you can take. It's built on what you give, and what you respect. You failed at both." The silence between them stretched. The only sound was the lapping of water against the dock. Finally, Emma spoke, her voice quieter than she intended. "Dad, we were wrong. But we can fix this. We can start over." For a moment, something softened in John's eyes, but it was gone as quickly as it came. Starting over doesn't mean pretending the past didn't happen. I've found peace here. And I'm not going back to a place where I'm treated like a burden. Michael clenched his fists. "So that's it? You're just cutting us off." John set his mug down on the railing and leaned forward. "I'm not cutting you off. I'm letting you go. The difference is, I'm choosing not to follow." The words hit like a stone dropped into still water, small at first, but sending ripples that spread far and deep. Michael's mouth opened, but no words came. Emma looked away, her throat tight. She realized now that the man sitting before them was no longer the father who would bend to keep the family together at any cost. This was a man who had rebuilt himself, and in doing so, had learned that some doors are better left closed. John stood, his movements slow and deliberate. "It's getting dark. You should head back." The conversation was over. As they turned toward the car, Emma glanced back one last time. John was already seated again, watching the lake, as if their arrival had been nothing more than a passing breeze. The distance between them now wasn't just physical, it was final. The first snow of December drifted down in slow, lazy spirals, coating the lake in a thin white veil. The cabin looked almost like it had grown out of the frozen earth, its roof heavy with snow, smoke curling from the chimney in steady ribbons. Inside, the warmth from the wood stove wrapped around John like a familiar blanket. The air smelled of pine logs and strong coffee. He moved with unhurried purpose, stacking wood by the stove, stirring the pot of stew simmering on the counter. Out here, days had their own rhythm, the crackle of fire in the morning, the quiet hum of the radio in the afternoon, the long silence of the evening broken only by the wind against the windows. For the first time in years, John felt like he was living with time instead of fighting against it. But the quiet wouldn't last forever. On the third Sunday of the month, he received a letter. No return address, just his name, written in a familiar but shaky hand. He knew before opening it that it was from Emma. Inside, the words were short and careful. "Dad, Michael's in trouble. Things have gone badly. He's asking for your help. I understand if you don't want to, but I had to tell you." John stared at the page for a long time. The fire popped loudly in the stove, as if urging him to make a decision. That evening, as the snow deepened outside, he thought back to every choice that had led him here. The eviction, the betrayal, the hollow apologies, the anger that had burned so hot it nearly consumed him, and then, the slow, deliberate rebuilding of a life without them. They had tried to break him, but he had chosen to stand apart. And now, here they were again, standing at the edge of his peace, asking to be let in. By morning, he had made his choice. He drove into town, the truck tires crunching over icy roads. At the small diner on Main Street, he found Emma waiting at a corner booth, wrapped in a thick scarf, her cheeks red from the cold. She looked older than he remembered, not in years, but in weight. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice low. John sat, ordered black coffee, and waited. "Michael got into a bad investment," she began. "He owes money, a lot. They're threatening him. He doesn't have anywhere else to turn." John sipped his coffee. And why should I be the one to save him? Emma's eyes glistened. Because you're still his father. Because, despite everything, you're better than he was to you. The silence stretched, heavy and cold. Finally, John reached into his coat pocket and set an envelope on the table. It was thin, not nearly enough to cover any serious debt, but enough to keep Michael breathing for a while. "This is all I'm willing to give," he said. "Not because he deserves it, but because I can live with myself after giving it." Emma took the envelope, her hands trembling. "He'll hate you for this." John shrugged. "He's hated me before. But I'm not here to buy his love. I'm here to make sure my conscience is clear when the snow melts." The rest of winter passed quietly. John spent the evenings reading by the fire, watching the lake freeze solid under a silver moon. He didn't hear from Michael. Not once. Emma sent 2 letters, short ones, mostly about the weather, and a mention that Michael had left town. When spring came, the ice on the lake cracked and drifted apart. The cabin filled with the sound of geese returning, their calls echoing across the water. John stood on the porch one morning, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise burn away the last frost. He felt no regret, no ache for what could have been. He had chosen his peace, and for the first time in his life, he had kept it. In town, people still talked, about the old man in the cabin, about the son who left, about the daughter who sometimes visited. But John didn't listen. The wind carried those voices away before they could reach his door. And in the stillness of the last winter, John realized something important. Sometimes, justice isn't about revenge. It's about living well enough that the people who wronged you can never touch you again. The snow kept falling, the lake kept freezing and thawing, and the man who had been left behind was never truly alone again. Thank you for spending this time with us. If the story moved you, even a little, let us know. Drop a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe for more stories that stay with you long after the screen fades. Your support means more than you know.